Madam Toastmaster, Toastmasters and guests, thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm very excited to be here to share a little bit about what I've learned in my coaching journey. As you heard in my introduction, I have many years of project management experience. The reason I'm sitting in front of you today as a coach is because I got to a point in my career where I thought, I don't remember being 12 years old. And as somebody talked about sitting in a stakeholders meeting, that being the dream. And so I started actually working on my own mission statement, and I encourage people to do this often. And in that work, I learned that I love to help people figure out their purposeful path. It's what I do as a project manager. And so I looked for what that meant for me, and coaching kept coming up. So I pursued a coaching certification, and that led me to beginning my own coaching practice. My coaching focus is on rising leaders who want to overcome the obstacles to see the possibilities so that they can make an impact right where they are. And tonight I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to do that. So let's get started. I love this quote. It talks about how we can unlock potential in others through our leadership. And that really is what leadership is all about to me. It's about helping people see what's possible. I also believe that we all lead. And in leading, we can make the biggest impact right where we are. You don't have to be an executive vice president. You don't have to actually have any title whatsoever to be able to lead. We all take steps to lead within our lives and the work that we do. And if we can think about how we work using that philosophy, then we can make a big impact right where we are. So tonight we're going to talk about a couple of things. I'm going to share with you my experience using energy leadership. I'm also going to talk about how to create connection using energy. And then we'll wrap that up with how we can manage that with in leading others. My vision for people that I work with is to help them understand how to make a ripple in the pond. And that's what I equate leadership to. It's like placing a drop in a pond of water. When you do that, the ripple goes out. You may not see where the ripple ends, but if you do something with such intention that it matters to you and to those around you, then you can be certain that the ripple that makes will be impactful long after you've set that intention. Leadership is no different. And so I want to talk to you today about energy leadership because that helps us put a framework around how we see ourselves and how we see others as leaders. So what is energy? If you recall from your
Physics.
I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback. If you recall from your high school and college science classes, energy really is about um, a power system, and we're all energetic beings, right? We're made up of energy. The world around us is made up of energy. And so the way that we interact with each other and what we share is energetic. And as a result of that, we impact each other each day, whether or not we're speaking to people, whether or not we're in the same room with them, no matter what, we're energetically impacting each other. So what does that look like? There are two types of energy. Again, you may have seen this in your science classes. There's anabolic energy. Anabolic energy is free-flowing energy. If you think about dandelions in the spring, when they sprout up on your lawn, you get all of those little white fuzzy seeds. And when the wind blows all the seeds all over your lawn, and you have this beautiful lawn of dandelions. That's actually anabolic energy. It's growth. It produces. It allows for flow. Conversely, sorry about that. Conversely, catabolic energy is breaking down. So if you think about the leaves falling off the trees in autumn, the snow in the wintertime falling on the leaves breaking down into the ground, that's catabolic energy. It releases the energy to break things down. And sometimes over time, that can be toxic. But both types of energy are necessary. If you think about what you learned in your science class, in order for us to have springtime flowers, we have to have the the seasons change and the catabolic energy of the winter and things dying off. Things are no different with us in terms of how we are as energetic beings. And if we can understand how we're energetically showing up, we can harness that for both our well-being as well as the well-being of others. So what does understanding that mean? If you can understand how you energetically show up, and it isn't measurable, I'll share that with you in a minute, then you can increase your productivity, the productivity of your teams. You can feel much greater connection with people. I've had people that have gone through this process with me tell me that they have had wholly different relationships with the people that they work with than before they began the work. So if you can really understand it, it helps make a difference in how you see the world. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So I'd like you to take a minute right now and just make a note for yourself about an intention you'd like to set to enhance your leadership abilities. Think about something that's important to you. And then I'd like to challenge you to look for the answer in that in what I'm presenting tonight. And interestingly, some of the content that your speakers gave support what I'm about to share with you. So who are we? We are who we believe we are, and we see the world that way. So all of the filters through which we see the world are based on our own experiences. And those experiences can be based on our values, our beliefs, and who we think we are in terms of our strengths and our weaknesses. Our attitude is about how we show up, but our energy is about what we're putting out. And we actually see the world the way we expect to see it. Interestingly, I was having a conversation with somebody today who said, I had an experience that was a very difficult one for me today, and I was very disappointed. And what I realized is I'm disappointed a lot because I have a specific expectation that goes unmet. And then I sit in the disappointment and it affects the people around me. That's an example of how energy can show up. So what does that look like in leadership? I'm going to give you an example with a tale of two leaders. In this example, I'll give you a typical example that you probably all experienced at some point in your project management career. You're working on a project, let's say it's a program and it's got several projects within it. And your client, who is one of your largest clients, calls you about 3/4 of the way through the project. Everything's going well, you're on time, you're on budget, everything's being measured properly, and tells you that they need to wholly change the requirements because a business emergency has occurred and they must manage things accordingly. And as a result, they want to change the outcome of the project from X to Y, and they need to change the requirements immediately. They don't give much room for explanation. They don't give much room for choice. They just ask you to go off and figure out how you're going to get it done. And by the way, the timeline isn't changing, and they want to try and maintain as much of the budget as they can. You have two leaders that have heard that feedback. The first leader walks out of the meeting and says, I don't even know what to do with that. I've spent months of my time and months of my team's time working through this project alongside these clients, and they never said a word. And now I have no idea how I'm going to handle it. In the middle of ruminating on that, one of his team members walks up and asks him a question about the change. And he barks and says, listen, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't even tell you what I have to tell you to do. You're just going to have to give me a minute. And he walks in his office door and slams the door. He sits down and thinks about all the feedback that the client gave, spends about 2 hours working through the timeline and all the things that they could do, and comes out and calls his team together and says, listen, we're going to do it this way. This is the only way I can see to get to end of job, to stay on time, and meet budget constraints that are now upon us. So let's everybody get to work. I'm sorry, we're going to have to double down. It's going to have lost vacation time, lost holiday time, but we've got to do it. And everybody leaves the room and begins to work. The second leader, who also has a project in this program, leaves the meeting and thinks, huh, I wonder what's really going on here. They didn't give much explanation about why all the changes. I'm gonna give the client a call. I know somebody there that might be able to give me some insight. Even though they're not directly related to this person, I think they know enough that they could help me. So this leader calls the client gives them some feedback, and this leader realizes I might be able to come up with some alternatives that actually might meet the client's need and be a better outcome for them. So he pulls the team together, his team together, and he shares the information with them, and he asks them, what are some ideas that we can come up with to be able to meet this need, and how might we go forward? They come up with ideas. Project manager calls the client, shares the information, and says, we actually have ways that can make this better for you, where we can come in a little bit earlier with a little less money if you're willing to compromise with us on some of these requirements. The client's more than happy to do so because it still meets the objective and the outcome for the changes that they need to make to the business. And the team chooses a solution and they go forward. You just witnessed two separate approaches. So let's talk about that. Give me some examples of what you noticed about the energy for some of those leadership traits that you saw produced in the examples that I gave. So what did you notice about these leaders' energies? You can come off mute and just give me some feedback that way.
One was looking for some positive ways to fix the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Curiosity.
Yeah.
It's a sense of teamwork. You want the team to participate in deciding which way to go, because this is what teamwork is all about. And that is a sign of leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you notice you felt listening to those stories? What came up for you as you listened to leader A, the leader that was kind of throwing down the gauntlet? How would you have felt if you were on his team, I guess? Let me ask it that way.
Maybe rushed.
Yeah. Yeah. Shared energy. It wouldn't have felt very good. So leader A was very catabolic, right? Feeling very heavy, weighty, not great about how things were going. Leader B, on the other hand, was in more of an anabolic approach, right? More free flowing, ideas were flowing, curiosity was flowing. So that gives you an example of how when we react and respond, how we see based on how we see the world, how that can show up energetically. So let me dive a little bit deeper into what that looks like for each for the variety of energy levels. So in this model, there are 7 levels of energy. As I said at the beginning, there is no right or wrong energy level. They all are meaningful and they all support us in some way. The lower levels of energy that you see in this chart here are catabolic. So level 1, level 2 are catabolic. Level 3 is moving into anabolic, and levels 4 through 7 are anabolic levels of energy. Actually, level 7 is both, and I'll explain that in a minute. The example I'm going to give you is the same example that I just gave you for the leaders. You're in a situation where you have a problem and you've hit a brick wall, right? You've hit the wall, and you have some choices about how you're going to handle the problem, overcome the brick wall. So I'll describe what that looks like at each level of energy. Know that we access every single one of these levels of energy throughout the day. So level 1, if somebody in level 1 energy hits the brick wall and is assessing a problem, they're going to slide their back down the brick wall and say, I don't even know what to do with this. They feel like they've lost. They feel like they don't know how to overcome, very apathetic and unable to drive any change. There are varied reasons that somebody might have this level of energy. Grief is one of them, but there may be other reasons in terms of burnout or just having too much overwhelm going on. That can also cause level 1. there's a value to level 1 energy, and that is that it gives you the space to take care of yourself. You can't affect much change there, and maybe, quite frankly, you shouldn't. Maybe it should be a sign that you need to check out for a little bit and take care of yourself in order to come back more energetically. Level 2, person in level 2 is going to hit the wall, and they're going to put their head down. They're going to try and break through the wall. And if they do so successfully, they're going to hit a bunch of people with bricks, and they're not going to worry too much about that. Their attitude is, I win. And that's that. I win. If you win, great, but I win. Can get a lot done. Level 2 can get a lot done in a short period of time. And they're typically driving things through fear. So if you notice the example I gave a minute ago, leader A was very level 1, level 2 energy, and eventually moved up to level 3, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the pro of level 2 is you get a lot done. The con of that is you do so in fear, and so the longevity of the relationships and connections you create are short in that period of time. So if you have catabolic leaders that operate in that level 2 a lot, it's very difficult to get things done long term.
It's kind of dictator-like.
I'm sorry, say again?
Is it a character of a dictator?
A dictator could be a good example of that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Okay, level 3. In this level, you begin to move to anabolic. Excuse me. This one really is about rationalization. It's about tactically getting things done. A lot of times in my project management work, I am in level 3 energy because I'm trying to get stuff done. I'm trying to check the box and make sure everybody's got everything done. And that's a really good place to be if you're in a very tactical mode and you need to make sure that things are moving along. The pro to level 3 is just that, making sure you're getting things done. The con is that sometimes it can feel a little bit disconnected to people, right? Because you're not connecting to them or meeting them where they are to make sure they're getting things done. And so therefore you might feel a little disconnected to them. Level 4 is what I call the heart-centered level of energy. That level of energy is really about helping people who hit the brick wall over the wall, and then you come over after them. So it's really about making sure people have what they need. And that is the pro, right? People feel very cared for when you're in their presence. Con to level 4 is that sometimes you can get pulled into other people's drama. Level 5 is what I call the leadership level of energy. In this level of energy, we're looking for the opportunity, and we're looking for how everybody can win. The con to level 5 is that sometimes we get stuck in analysis paralysis if there's a lot of opportunities. Level 6 is what I call the intuitive level of energy. This level of energy, when you hit the brick wall, you intuitively understand what the purpose of it is and how you're going to absorb it into your work. There is no problem with the wall. It just is there, and it may be necessary and can be used for good. Again, level 6 can cause people to feel somewhat disconnected from you. If you see everything intuitively and can kind of work your way through things, but you've got somebody at level 3 that's trying to tactically get something done, you may not connect very well. And level 7 sees the brick wall and doesn't even acknowledge it. There is no brick wall. We can create whatever we want out of this problem and solve it however we think we need to do that. In some cases, the leader B that I gave you, the example I gave you a minute ago, has some level 7 energy because they were willing to sit down and create alternative solutions. So how do you measure this? First of all, before I can go on, does anybody have any questions about the levels of energy? Okay.
Nope.
I do actually, sorry about this. So
Oh.
we're 1, intuitive, fearless. For that level, is it feasible that the leader basically perhaps leaves some of their teammates behind? Is that the level that you were describing this way? Intuitive, fearless?
Yeah, that can be a con to that level of energy, certainly. If they don't recognize that somebody is it a different level of energy or doesn't get it, then it may feel like they're leaving others behind. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And as you'll notice, there's a pro and a con to every level of energy. So the question is, where are you sitting and how do you want to use that to support yourself? So energy is measurable. This is an example of how energy appears. In this is a group profile of a group of people in a team. There are probably about 10 to 12 people in this team. And you can see on the left side how the team energetically shows up in just kind of normal everyday stress. So the example I gave you earlier where, people were just kind of figuring it out, they're going through their day, they're working on their things. That's how the energetic profile reads. So you can see that this team has a lot of level 4, level 5, level 3 energy. They're tactical, but they do so with heart. They come together with heart. They use a lot of their leadership capability to lead themselves through. And they also have a lot of intuition that they're using. On the right side is the energetic stress reaction. So that's the reaction that we have when that catastrophic event hits. So when the customer gives us the feedback that things are changing drastically, but we still have to meet all of our deadlines and our commitments, that's what that stress reaction can look like. And the question that often people need to work through is, how long am I staying there? So the graph on the right is actually a pretty normal stress reaction for most people. Question is, how long are they staying in that stress reaction? And you can see that it carries over to the graph on the left, and therefore there are people in this team that are still holding on to some catabolic energy as they come into their normal day. And so if I were working with somebody as a leader, I might help them kind of do some things to release that energy. Any questions about that?
Mhm.
So here's the thing about your stress reaction and your energetic profile. This can change from day to day, month to month, year to year. So this mix may not look the same a year from now, depending on the experiences people had, depending on how aware they are of their energy and the choices that they've made. So the nice thing is that just because we have certain energy levels, we can adjust. So just really quickly, take a moment and just jot down some ideas for yourself about things that you think hold your team or organization back from doing its best, challenges that your team or organization face currently, and what do you want to celebrate about what your team or your organization does well? Just take a minute and just jot those things down. And as you're doing so, pay attention to the energy and how it feels in writing those responses. Okay. What did you notice in terms of your energy level in the first two bullets? What did you notice? How did it feel? You don't have to name the energy level, but how did it feel?
Stressful.
Okay.
A little anxious.
Yeah. Okay. And how about the third one, the celebrating? How did that feel? Seeing some nods and some smiles. Felt a little better. Yeah. Yeah. The way that we see things matters, right? And a lot of times when we think about things that hold us back or things that might be perceived as problems, the anxiety and the negative feelings can kick in. And that's an indicator of where you might be sitting energetically. You might be thinking, well, I've got to do something about that. So I'm going to take some specific action and go do something about that. Or you might decide I'm not going to do anything and I'm just going to see how this plays out and hope for the best. Or you might be able to get curious and see what are the opportunities? What might change if I engage here and do some, offer something different or do something or bring something different. So even when things feel tough, you can show up with high energy if you can shift yourself there. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So how do we go from here to here? We have to understand the things that are getting in our way. And these may be things, I'm certain these are things probably that you've heard of already. So the things that typically get in our way for our energy are what I call block. They can be outer block, which are things that are out of our control, things like economic conditions, the amount of money or budget we have, a legal or regulatory item that we have to comply with, something malfunctions and you can't control that. So those are the outer control, out of control items that can actually affect your energy. Typically, unless it's something really catastrophic, typically that's going to cause, most people are not going to stay in catabolic energy because of that, but that can impact you. The bigger impact are inner blocks. And those blocks are based on how you see the world, what your beliefs are about the world, what your judgments are. And you typically hear, I can't, or it's not possible, or this feels hard. And that's kind of how you know you're in kind of an inner block or an inner judgment. So those include assumptions. So because something happened in the past, it's going to happen again. It's rooted in experience. Interpretation, so a judgment that you create based on an expectation you have or an experience you've had in the past that you think, as an assumption might happen again, but your interpretation of it is that it's going to happen again. Or that you believe to be true, even if you don't have the facts to back it up. And then finally, limiting beliefs or something you accept about yourself or your life. One of the most famous examples of this, a limiting belief, was, I believe it was in the 1950s. There was a track and field runner who was the fastest runner and was expected to win the gold medal, the Olympics. And at the time, track and field personnel were led to believe that you couldn't run faster, I think, than a 4-minute mile. I think it was a 4-minute mile. I might be wrong about that. And so nobody did. Nobody did. And for a long time, people just kind of ran at the same pace. And there were the same several people that were winning races because nobody was actually getting any faster. And there was one particular runner who decided that they weren't sure that they could believe that. Their doctors all said it was physically impossible. You could have a heart attack. There's all sorts of things that could happen if you tried to run faster. And this person decided that they were going to train and try to run faster. And they actually broke that record in that Olympic Games. And they've been breaking that record ever since. That's a really famous example of how a limiting belief and how beliefs that we share can also limit, a larger group view of how things work. So why do blocks matter? Why do they matter? And how do they typically feel? So I'm going to give you some, just kind of some some more scientific information about how this works. So our judgment actually lives in our brain. So the emotion is tied to it, right? We have a judgment or a thought. We have millions of them in our lifetime. The repetitiveness of the thought or even judgment creates neural pathways in our brain. And when we have those thoughts, we feel things and emotions come up, and then we act upon them, right? The thing that creates most of our blocks is called what I call the judge or your roommate. I have a friend that calls that listening to your roommate. And that actually lives in your limbic brain. It affects everybody. And this judge typically beats us up for our mistakes, tells us that we're not enough, creates a lot of our anxieties, and wants us to keep our hand on the hot stove. So judgment typically happens to alarm us, and as part of that limbic brain system, that something needs to change quickly and we should take action. But it's not meant to keep us there, right? That was never the design of our brains. But because of the culture we live in and the way that we've evolved, that is what happens. And the judgment asks us to hold our hand on the hot stove and continue to pay attention to it. And it can feel very negative. So if you're in a situation where you don't feel like you have control over something, for example, and you feel like you need to gain control over it and you're not sure how to do it, you might feel negative judgment as a result of that. So a judge typically feels critical. They feel like there's a this or that black and white mentality to judgment. It's very authoritative, very opinionated. As opposed to that, discernment, which is that individual single second, oh, I see that issue. I need to do something about it. That's more discernment. It's based on a vision. It allows you to see and understand differences and then be able to make decisions based on that. Our judge is supported by the way that we view the world. And in that case, it can be either antagonistic, it can feel antagonistic to us, or we can actually see things from a very wise perspective. I follow a body of work called Positive Intelligence. I'm actually a certified coach in Positive Intelligence. I'm getting certified. I'm not certified yet, but I've studied their work. And essentially what they describe is that we have saboteurs. They give an example of 9 different saboteurs that actually, based on how we see the world, support the judgment that we have. So when we are in judgment and it doesn't feel good, the way that we respond in that catabolic energy can cause further energy share in terms of how we're responding. So for example, I tend to be I'm a project manager. I tend to be hyper vigilant when I am feeling like I can't control something, which means that, you know what a hyper vigilant project manager looks like. It's somebody that's really going to stay with you and make sure that you're getting all your tasks done and following all the guidelines and doing everything perfectly. And we'll ask and ask and ask until we make sure things are done. And it can be very daunting for people when I get into that hypervigilant stage. Conversely, though, that hypervigilance is based on a gift, and that gift is the wisdom that I can bring to a project if I'm in a calm, peaceful place, right? If I'm using some of the deep breaths that Janja talked about earlier. And that looks more like I can see the big picture. I can see how we're going to get there. I can see that we have a hurdle that we might have to overcome. And I'm going to proactively pull people together and let's brainstorm about how we might overcome it. So leader A versus leader B. Oftentimes, that saboteur and those judgments will reinforce some of the negative behavior and some of the internal judgments that you feel. So how do you move through that? I'm going to give you a quick exercise to do. I just want to check my time. And this is not different from what not too different from what Jaja shared with us earlier in terms of deep breathing. So I was really pleased to see her presentation around that. The science basically says that if you can move out of that fight or fight place in the back of your head and get into your body in some way, shape, or form, what you're actually doing is getting your brain to release that fight or flight and move into the prefrontal cortex, which is where your wisdom and your creativity live. And so if you can do that, even for just 2 minutes, you can shift your thinking to become more, to use and access more of your sage powers. Your sage powers include things like curiosity, empathy, the ability to navigate, the ability to really explore alternatives, the ability to take really clear, focused action from a place of peace and calm. That's what your sage wisdom looks like. And that's how it feels, very peaceful and calm. So I want you just to take a minute here. And if you're comfortable, feel free to close your eyes. But if you don't want to close your eyes, just softly stare at the colors on the screen. And I want you to take a really deep breath. I want you to feel your breath all the way through your body. And then I want you to just listen for the farthest thing away you can hear. Just really listen for it. Notice how far away it is. And now I want you to notice the closest thing you can hear. And if you haven't heard your breath, listen for your breath. I'd like you to pay attention to your feet on the floor. Whether or not you're standing or sitting, just notice the weight of your feet on the floor. Notice how they feel in your shoes. Maybe even wiggle your toes a little bit and notice your toes. Finally, take another deep breath and come back to the screen when you're ready. So you can do all sorts of things to get into your body. You can, if you're sitting in a meeting and somebody has a shirt on that's as colorful as this screen, you can just notice the way the shades of the colors change. You can look out the window and notice what's going on outside without them noticing that you're trying to disconnect and calm down a little bit. You can take a deep breath. You can notice how your body feels sitting in the chair. You can rub 2 fingers together. All of those things allow you to move and shift into more of your sage space in your brain. And when you do that, you can begin to explore, what do I want to be curious about? What are some of the beliefs that I might be experiencing here that might be creating this? Why am I feeling like I need to do something about this? What's true about what I need to do? So think about an example at home or work and try that practice and see if you can come up with alternative ways to pursue a different track, a different approach. See what comes up for you. Some of the questions you can ask yourself as you do that, as I said, what's true? I love to ask my clients that question. What's really true about this? Because when you ask what's really true about something, what you find is that what you believe to be true may not be what's actually true. They may be just your beliefs. Ask where ideas came from. And who do I want to be in this situation? It may be that you have a situation where you hit that brick wall and you don't know what to do and you're feeling very low energy. Give yourself permission to feel that. You might have to say, I'm going to sit here for a minute in this until I can come through it and figure it out. That's okay, as long as you're aware of it. Asking what the effect is and how you want the future to look. Do you still want to hold on to what you're experiencing? Looking for proof. And obviously, as project managers, we do this all the time. What's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? So those are ways that you can move through your blocks. Any questions about anything I've covered so far? At the beginning of the session, I asked you to set an intention about what you wanted for your leadership abilities. Now I'd like you to take a moment and just jot down some of the qualities that you believe create an ideal leader. Think about qualities that you have. Think about leaders that you admire. What are some of the characteristics or the strengths or the skills that they have that you think are important? And you see a few on the screen here in the word puzzle. And then think about how well you perform that. And choose maybe one or two that you might want to focus on growing. And as you think about that, think about how that ties back to your intention and how you might use some of what you learned tonight about energy leadership and how we energetically show up to be able to support yourself in growing that trait. Does anybody have any that they want to share?
I would like to share. So for myself, like the company I work, sometimes we have a lot of miscommunication and also like conflict. So me personally, I want to get better at that. When we have a conflict between two people, how to be able to calmly help resolve those conflicts and also to help with better communication.
And how do you think what you learned tonight so far would help you do that? What just no right or wrong answer, just what comes up for you as a way that you might be able to do that?
I think the energy level, I really like it, the different energies. So I think I have to be empathetic, maybe like more like listening, the energy I should bring in, like help everybody feel calm and able to communicate and also maybe help them, resolve the conflict.
Yeah, listening is a very high energy approach. So being able to actively listen, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Thank you, Hema. Okay, so how do you use this to lead your teams? Knowing what we know now. Listening, as Hema just pointed out, is important. And you can listen for how engaged either you are or how engaged somebody else is by listening to what they say. If they say, I won't, I have to, or I need to, then they feel like they either have a limited amount of choice, a limited amount of power, or a limited amount of both. If they say they choose to, or some form of I choose to, that means they feel total power and total choice. Now we can look at every problem, every block that comes up, and we can determine where we are in the range of engagement. If it's an outer block, we might not be able to do anything about it, but we can certainly have a choice in how we deal with it, right? And in terms of assumptions, limiting beliefs, or interpretations, you can make choices about how you want to view those things. So really listening for how people are sharing information with you, what they're saying, will help you understand, where they energetically are. If they're saying won't have to or need to, they might be in lower levels of energy. And if they are choosing to, then there's ability to create whatever you want to create in the choice. When people are in lower levels of engagement or energy, a really great way to be able to meet them where they are is to acknowledge and validate what they're feeling. So if somebody's hit that brick wall, let's say leader B, or I'm sorry, leader A in the example I gave, I might say to them, if I were going to acknowledge and validate, it makes perfect sense that you're upset about this change. Your team has put hours and hours of work into this, and now you're in a situation where it's likely you may have to tell them they have to give up vacation or holiday time, and nobody wants to hear that, and that's going to feel very hard. So it really does make sense that you feel this way, and anybody would. If you can acknowledge and validate somebody so that they feel heard, the next step that you can take is to understand what might be an alternative choice to think about. Sometimes if we just rush in and try and solve the problem for people, then they don't have an opportunity to actually catch up with us. Somebody asked that question earlier. What happens if people aren't with me and I'm in that intuitive level of energy? Well, if somebody's sitting in catabolic energy, it's hard for them to get there because they're only looking at what's right in front of them. They're looking inside, they're not looking out. So if you can help meet them where they are by listening, then you can help shift them. So what does that look like in the real world? There are a couple of things that we can do. We can create empowerment, which means that every time we say something like, they won't let us do that, or it's not in our scope, or something like that, we're shrinking the playing field. Instead, we can ask something different. What might we ask that's different than that?
A question that starts with how.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What's possible? How can we do something different? Yeah. What are the alternatives? Yeah. The next is to be empowered. So that means both being curious, but it also means understanding your boundaries, right? We have boundaries in projects all the time, but sometimes they can be pushed and sometimes they can't. Sometimes we have to accept them. So one of the tools that I like to share with people is a brainstorming approach called yes and. Has anybody ever heard of that before? Yeah. Yeah. So essentially, the way that works is that instead of everybody kind of throwing ideas out, you start with one person, and the person engaging with them tells you what they like about their idea and then adds to that. So even if you think the idea is not a great one, you can find the 10% that you like about that idea and then add to it. That's a really good way to be empowered in a situation, especially when you feel like you don't have control. The third is to actively listen. And as I said, acknowledge things. Be intuitive. Listen with your heart. Listen with your sixth sense. If something doesn't feel off, don't be afraid to say, I'm sensing that you're not in agreement. What more do we maybe need to talk about? and it creates a space for people to trust and have empathy. And then finally, be aware of your own energy as you lead. So, set the tone, set the attitude, and give yourself time to prepare. So if you know you're going into a crucial conversation, do some of that deep breathing. Get ready to go into the conversation and give yourself the space to kind of settle yourself before you do so.
If I may interject, we'll just say 8 o'clock right now, or 8:01.
Thank you. Okay. This is the last slide, so let me just quickly finish. Finally, this is kind of the homework that I'll give you. Tie your leadership to your values so that you can lead from them and make decisions from them. And the way that you do this is just go out, Google the word value list, and find some value words that are meaningful to you. Define them for yourself. Doesn't matter whether the definition agrees with anybody else's. Define them for yourself. And then be intentional about how you use those values to lead and to make decisions. And they'll help you going forward. So my name is Tara Ondusky. I have a coaching practice called Origin Coaching, and I also am a project manager. And I appreciate your taking the time to listen to what I had to offer tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tara. Give her a big round of applause. Oops. Let's go. Stand back up. I want to thank you to, first of all, I just want to see if it is 8:02. Just want to see if you can hang out a little longer and answer any questions, or sorry, if you want to ask any questions for Tara regarding her presentation or even her practice. Does anyone have any questions?